Hey, I'm Alex.
And I'm Brandon.
And welcome to Living Electric.
We're both content creators and electric vehicle enthusiasts.
And through this podcast, we hope to share our experience with owning electric vehicles and help you join the electric life. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 7 of Living Electric. We are live and in person for this episode. I'm actually sitting in Brandon's studio/office right now. So happy to actually do this in person for the first time.
Right?
Hopefully going to make editing and syncing audio much easier.
Much easier. It's a great time to be alive, right?
That's right. So I'm actually shooting a kind of, I guess, destination travel type video for my channel right now. I just got a mattress to fit in my Model 3, so we just shot some footage of me climbing in the back of my car and setting up the mattress. So
in my driveway.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. So that video should be hitting the channel soon. And we talked about my Mach-E video last episode, and I'm finally posting it. I think I mentioned that I was going to have it posted by the time our last episode went live, but I finally got that edited, and that should be live around the same time this podcast goes live. So that's all on my end.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Have you posted any good major content recently?
No. I have not. The best one was the Taycan.
That's right, yeah.
Most recent.
Yeah, and we talked about that.
Got some really good feedback on that one.
Yeah.
Excited to do more Porsche videos.
Definitely.
But I am recording charging station activations tomorrow, so...
Oh, yeah, okay. Yep. Which stations?
ChargePoint and EVgo.
Okay.
Using the My Chevy app.
Awesome.
Tried it the other night in an empty Walmart parking lot, and it did not go well.
Oh, no.
So I'm going to do it in the day. It's much safer this time.
Yeah, true.
So looking forward to that.
Alrighty, so our major topic this episode, we're going to be talking about EV economics, more on kind of the personal finance side of things, because a lot of people will claim that you could save money by driving an electric vehicle. And I think there's kind of some stipulations there, depending on which car you go with and what kind of car you're driving or switching from, I guess. So both Brandon and I were going to kind of share our experience switching to an electric vehicle, if we've actually saved any money, if we've spent more money, what that process has been like. So I'll let you go first, because you're kind of a more traditional EV owner in that sense, because you have a house and you charge at home, so you have home electricity costs and all that stuff. So
definitely. Yeah, I would say having a home charger and being able to charge at your house is, I would say, as you mentioned, the most traditional way to charge your electric vehicle. For us, I kind of want to touch base on the upfront costs of how much it costs to install the charging station, how much the charging station was, and just kind of the ongoing costs of charging my Chevy Bolt. Mm-hmm. So to start, we're Costco members. Love Costco. That's not a sponsorship or not a placement in this podcast, but we did purchase a EVSE or a charging station through Costco for about $300 to $350. Mm-hmm. I honestly can't remember, but it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
It's a Siemens VersaCharge L2. And
great name.
Yeah, right. I know. Rolls right off the tongue. But it works well. There's no Wi-Fi connection, so it's just a very simple charging station. Mm-hmm. And then the overall cost for us, since we did a direct line to the side of the house, was about $300 through the electrician that we went through.
Gotcha. So it's $350 for the actual charger ish, and then for installing the electrical line to it was an additional $300.
Correct.
So total was around $650 ish.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and the one thing I would recommend is always get quotes, because the first electrician we talked to is going to charge us $1,300 to run just a direct line.
Yeah. And I think that I don't want to mean to cut you off, or just before you get too ahead of everything, I think it's important to remember that you can get as complicated as you want with those chargers, right? So I know me driving a Tesla, most Tesla owners get a Tesla wall connector installed, where just the charger itself is around $700, I think, $500, $700, if I remember right. And that's just the cost of the charger. And I think it's important to remember you don't have to do that driving an electric vehicle. You don't need to go crazy like that. It can be as simple as just installing a dryer outlet in your garage and just plugging in with a mobile connector.
Yeah.
And that gets the job done, honestly. Or if you're not driving a lot, you can just plug into a regular wall outlet.
Yeah.
Because all EVs come with just the regular 120 volt wall outlets, as far as I'm aware. So,
and I have a lot of friends that actually just do that. Like they'll just use the wall outlet because they drive less than 50 miles a day.
Yeah,
and they'll just plug it in that way.
Yeah, and you can recoup those miles overnight.
Yeah.
And what I've heard, the most expensive part of it, installing a charger, is actually running that electrical line.
Yeah.
So, because you said you thought about putting it in the garage, right? Which probably would have added an additional 25 feet to where they run that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that wire that they run is expensive. So every foot you go farther is adding, $50 or so to how long you need to, or how much you need to spend. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody's situation's different. Our garage is detached, and as Alex mentioned, it's about 25 feet away from our house, and the electricity's ran underground. So they would have to dig up our whole backyard. It's just a construction process. And the one thing that, like, I think when it comes to, like, deciding what charging station you're going to go for, remember your current situation. When we bought our charging station, I was just wrapping up college, like I have student loans. So like we wanted to fix it in our budget. Yeah. And we kind of knew what functionalities we wanted out of it, and it just works for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
So eventually we'll replace it with something smarter. But for right now it works well.
Because you kind of have like a dumb charger per se. Like you just plug it in and it starts charging.
It lights up though.
It does light up. That is right.
But yeah, it is a dumb charger.
Yeah. So you can't see any like data on how much you're charging or how many kilowatt hours it's pulling or anything like that.
No. There is I don't want to say like a trim level to that charger, but there is like a smarter version of that charger that does have Wi-Fi connections. Gotcha. But the Siemens app is something from like 2008. Like they have not updated it, and I think it's only optimized for like an iPhone 4. So
that's fun.
yeah. Old software.
Yeah.
But it works well. And the nice thing is that at the time there was a federal tax credit of 30% towards the installation of our charger. I don't know. I think that expired back at the end of 2019. But we were able to write off some of the costs. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that helped with it.
That does. Was there like a limit on that? Because 30% could, like, if you put in a $1,000 charger, it could be $300.
No, there was no limit on it.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then after you get the charger installed, that's probably kind of like one of the first big expenses, I guess, you'll get with an electric vehicle. But after that, that's kind of like your main infrastructure expense, I guess, with kind of setting up your charging situation. So after you install that charger and you were charging your EV every day, what was your electricity cost like? Did you see a significant bump or?
No. Yeah, I didn't see like a bump at all. In fact, compared to what I was spending in gas, which I had a 2017 Volkswagen Golf before, spending about $200 plus a month. In gas, it went down to about $30 a month in electricity, and that was driving the same distance.
It's insane, like how much like cheaper per mile that you can get with an EV. So typically EVs are more expensive up front. You're going to spend more on EV than a comparable gas car, but as soon as you spend that money up front, you're just pure driving costs go down a ton. So I know it definitely depends on how much you're driving too. And an important thing to remember is when you plug in at night, you're not always going from like 0 to 100, right? So, so you probably unplugged your car with like 90% in the middle or beginning of the day. You drive to work, drive home, plug back in. What are you typically like returning to home with when you're commuting?
So my typical drive is about 50 plus miles round trip. Okay. So depending on the weather and like exterior temperature conditions, I get home with like about maybe like 50%. Okay. Yeah. Starting at about 90%. Yeah. So not terrible, but that's like my driving style. Yeah. Like, I'm not slow. Yeah. Definitely. So if you drive it more efficiently, you'd probably get home with a higher state of charge.
Yeah, which is, it's just like gas. If you drive aggressively, you're going to use more gas. So.
Exactly.
You're going to have less MPG. So
exactly. Yeah, the one other thing I do want to mention, you touched on it, like you might be spending a little bit more upfront when it comes to like buying an electric vehicle, but there is a federal tax credit for most electric vehicles right now.
Yeah, Tesla's out of that conversation, and so is GM. So the Bolt no longer is eligible, and all Tesla vehicles can't get that right now, unfortunately. But any other manufacturer, so like BMW or Ford, Volkswagen, any of those are gonna all have tax credits, which are huge.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that really helped me get into an electric car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And an important thing to remember there that it is a tax credit. It's not like just money off the purchase price of the car. So that money is going to come when you get your tax return. It's not going to come when you purchase the car. So you do kind of have to do some planning there and make sure you're able to spend that money up front, but you'll get it back later. So in my situation, when I bought my Model 3, it was actually still eligible for a portion of that tax credit. So I bought it in November of 2019. It was still eligible for the $1,875, I think. It was like a quarter of the tax credit because it phases out. And I bought my car, took delivery, paid all the money up front and stuff for it. And then when I did my taxes for 2019, I ended up getting that tax credit back. So I got, on top of my tax return, I got $1,875, which was a nice little check. So
definitely.
So that definitely helps.
Yeah. I got lucky with mine. I got it before it phased out to that 1,800, so I got it about 37.5.
Okay.
Yeah, because with the way that the tax credit works is you hit 200,000 sold vehicles.
Yeah.
And then it starts phasing out over time. So like it starts at $7,500, divides to, I think it was 37.50.
Yeah.
And then it drops down to the 18.50.
For another like 6 months or something.
Yeah.
And then it fades away after that.
Couldn't remember the exact amount.
I think it's 1875 was the quarter of that.
It sounds like it.
If I can do my math right. So another thing with that tax credit is there's a lot of like bills being proposed right now that will reinstate that tax credit for GM and Tesla. A lot of them have just been like introduced. They're not necessarily passed or even being discussed like on the House floor or anything like that. But that is something to kind of keep an eye on. I did a like kind of a short video on that and basically told people if you're able to wait 6 months to a year, it's probably best to wait, honestly, till the politics kind of work out and see where we end up with things. But if you're like ready to buy a car right now, I don't think you should be waiting around for that tax credit because, I mean, politics move slow.
Yep. And there's
you never really know what kind of things are going to be passed. So.
Yep. And there's no better time to go electric.
That's right. No time to waste.
Yeah, exactly.
I think my charging situation is a lot different because when I bought my car, I was doing all my charging at work. So luckily, they provided charging for free.
That's
nice.
That's so
that
nice.
was a big financial driving factor for me when I bought my car, and what allowed me to afford it was the fact that I could charge at work for free and basically cover all my miles. So I'd drive to work in the morning, I'd plug in my car, and be good by the time I left. And if it was a weekend, I'd make sure I charge up a little bit extra so I can last the whole weekend driving wherever I'm going, and just plug in again on Monday. So I think before switching to driving electric, I was spending around $200 a month on gas, and now I spend close to zero on fuel.
That's awesome.
I'm very fortunate to have free charging at work. We're not going to the office right now, but I did have that. I have a ton of referral miles, so thank you to anybody that's ever used one of those. If you watch my YouTube channel or follow me on Twitter or anything, I really appreciate that. That's allowed me to save a ton of money on gas and fuel for my car now. And then I honestly, it's kind of a fun thing to do now is hunt out free chargers.
Oh, yeah.
There's a ton of them out there, and a lot of companies will put them in to attract potential customers. And I think it's honestly a thing that a lot of more businesses should be considering, because if there's a restaurant or something with free charging and one without, I'm probably going to go to the one with free charging.
Same. Absolutely. It's almost like a game trying to find free charger.
That's right, yeah.
It's a blast.
And even like, I think electricity costs per mile compared to gas are roughly a half to a fourth of what it costs per mile. So, I mean, if you are somebody that drives a lot and can plug in at home or plug in at your destination, if you are doing a lot of driving, it's definitely can save you a ton on just fuel costs, because electricity is so cheap compared to gas. Another part of that too is, I know big discussion right now is that gas prices are rising again, which is not really something you have to worry about as an EV driver.
I have not thought about gas prices in probably 2 years.
That's wild.
I just don't even care to check because it's just something I don't have to worry about.
Yeah, and that varies all the time. I mean, it varies with supply and demand. The thing with electricity rates is they're very highly regulated. Your local utility has a monopoly on providing service to your area, and they can't just like run up the electricity bill cost for everybody, because then that would be bad, because consumers don't really have a choice when it comes to that. So can't really like extort people to give them to pay that extra money. So that's another advantage as well.
So I was gonna say, so you have all that free supercharging like mileage, pretty much. So do you see any costs in driving electric, like your specific? Like,
in my case, like specifically?
Yeah.
In terms of what? Like fuel costs or like electric fuel costs?
Yeah.
Honestly, right now, the only time I pay for charging is when I visit a public charger that has a fee. So I'm trying to think of the last time I went there, because it was recently. I stopped at I think a ChargePoint charger, actually. It cost like, I think $1 per hour or something like that, and plugged in there for a couple hours.
Still not bad.
Yeah, like I've spent like pennies on the mile basically
That's awesome.
for the past year, because right now we're working from home. I basically supercharge exclusively, which is not great for your battery, but it's kind of my only option right now. So I'll just take like a 10-minute drive over to the grocery store, plug in my car, get my groceries, and come back and be good, all supercharged up. So. But yeah, able to use all those referral miles and don't spend like very much on charging at all.
That's awesome.
So
I know from my experience with like paying at like charging stations like Electrify America and like doing like long distance road trips, it's so much cheaper than gas still. Like on average, most of my stops would be anywhere from like $10 to $15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably where you're going to see the biggest costs in electric fuel is those fast chargers, because that's really kind of where they run up the bill a little bit, because you are paying for that convenience of that higher charging speed, and those are expensive stations to build too, because running that high power electric out to those stations can get expensive.
So recently on my YouTube channel, I posted a short about EV maintenance and pretty much how the only maintenance besides like the wear and tear items is your windshield wiper fluid.
Yep.
So, and that's, if you don't use it, then you really don't refill it as often as I probably do. But that's the only maintenance I've really had to worry about.
Yeah, that's basically the same for me. How many miles are on your Bolt right now?
I think I'm about to 18,000.
Okay. What service have you done like total for it? That you've had to pay for, I guess.
Pretty much like tire swapping.
Okay.
So like going from like summer tires to like winter tires.
Yeah. But that's normal. You're gonna have that on any car, right?
Typical wear and tear.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's it. Everything else has been covered under warranty.
That's good.
If there's an issue.
Yeah, it's kind of skewed with new cars, because you do have that new car warranty. But I'm in a similar boat. I haven't had any major maintenance at all done to my car. I do need to get new tires soon, but I think that's the only thing that I really need to worry about. I know previously I was spending a decent amount on oil changes, because that was every 500 to 7,500 miles of oil changes.
Yep. Yeah.
There's no oil really in an EV, oil, no engine oil to change, so don't have to worry about that.
I know the one car that we had, it was, now don't be shocked, we had a TDI, a Volkswagen diesel, and we took it in for the automatic transmission like annual maintenance, and it's $1,000 a year just to flush and change the fluid for just the transmission.
Jeez.
Yeah. So
you have to do that every year?
That's every year. Yeah, but that's only if it's like an automatic, because it's like a complex like transmission.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah. Nope. And even in like the Golf we had, the oil changes were like $150.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what's the big expenses really with an EV, like repair wise, in terms of like maintenance. You've got your battery and you've got your motors. That's kind of the main moving parts on the vehicle. That's probably what's going to fail. Like moving parts are generally what fails in a car, but the motors last basically forever. We've pretty much perfected the electric motor engineering wise. Like they run forever. The battery is really the only thing to worry about. And I I hear a lot of people kind of worried about that with an EV, and I think it's important to remember that batteries aren't just going to die after a couple of years like your cell phone battery.
Yeah.
Right?
It's more impressive technology in an EV
yeah.
battery.
So, and there's a lot of things you can do to prolong the life of your battery. But before I get into that, bottom line is it's designed to last the life of the car. So I'm pretty sure it's mandated. It's got to have a warranty of at least 8 years, 100,000 miles. And that means if your battery dies or breaks or anything goes wrong with it in that time, the manufacturer has to replace it under warranty. So you do have that peace of mind when you buy an EV. And then when you're talking about keeping care of your battery, it's always good to not let it go down too low and also not charge it up way too high. And also fast charging can kind of prolong more quickly degrade the battery faster than other stuff. So those are kind of things to avoid. But I think typical day-to-day driving, I mean, like, you probably don't fast charge very often.
No. Last time I fast charged was September.
Yeah. That's wild.
Definitely don't. I just use my charger at home.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, a simple rule of thumb you could think of it too is it's just like your cell phone. Like, if it offers fast charging, your battery's going to degrade faster.
Exactly.
You never want to charge it to 100% unless you absolutely have to. Like, yeah.
So those are all things to remember, but I don't think going into a car, going into an EV at least, you shouldn't be like worried about replacing the battery in 5 years. Like, that's not really a thing. Like, it certainly happens with like old EVs. Like, if you want to do a battery swap, and even at that point, that doesn't mean the battery has failed. It generally means that the battery just has degraded and lost like a significant amount of its miles. So, like, an EV will still run with the original battery in it. It just might not get the original 250 miles. It might be down to like 200 now. So that's kind of a different part of EVs, I guess, versus gas cars, because I feel like engine will just like fail. And you can't drive it, right?
At that point you're stuck.
Yeah.
I do know from stories I've read, like the Chevy Volt. I think he's actually in Ohio. He, at the time, this was a few years ago, he hit 300,000 miles on his Chevy Volt. And the battery still had a 95% like state of charge limit.
Wow.
So like the technology, obviously as time goes, it's just going to improve. And that was a 2012 Chevy Volt.
Yeah.
So that technology is older, in the terms of technology, but it's still holding up really well. Yeah.
And I've heard fast charging is probably the number one thing that degrades your battery quickly. So unless you are like taking road trips and stuff like that, it's probably something you want to avoid, but don't feel like you have to, because you're going to like kill your battery if you do. Like, drive the car.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Just drive and enjoy it.
That's right. Another thing too, the batteries we're seeing that are kind of going bad now are from cars from like 2012, like you said. So the truth of it is we really don't know how long batteries are going to last that are coming off the line right now. I mean, like, they're really good batteries and they've continued to improve, like you said. So, I mean, they could last 8 years, they could last 18 years. So it's hard really to tell.
And I know Tesla's really striving for that 1,000,000-mile battery pack.
Yeah, that like will just last literally forever. Like, it's going to outlast the shell of the car.
Yeah.
So
yeah, hopefully it gets there. That would be impressive.
For sure.
Yeah. And another thing, too, on just, like, the topic of battery maintenance is that there's the difference between, like, the liquid-controlled, like, temperature batteries and, like, the air-cooled. So, like, the old Nissan Leafs are air-cooled batteries, so that's typically where you'll see degradation faster because it doesn't have a battery management system to control the battery temperature.
Yeah.
So, not to get too much into, like, technical terms, but like our, Alex's Tesla and my Bolt has a liquid battery management system that uses coolant to keep the battery in the optimal temperature.
Yeah.
With fast charging and day-to-day use as well. So that will help with longevity.
Definitely, yeah, because battery heat and like the temperature of the battery is something that can degrade the battery as well. And yeah, that liquid cooling system. Another thing I actually had a question about from my grandpa, actually. He sent me an email asking about it because somebody had talked about, I heard there's battery coolant that needs replaced. And I actually looked it up in the Tesla manual and it said under normal driving conditions and like normal wear and tear, you should not need to replace that battery coolant ever. Like you shouldn't need to at all. So I'm not sure if you have something like that in your bolts, if you can even like access that fluid or
I
not.
have no idea. That's actually a thought I never had crossed in my mind. So I don't know.
But that's one of the few like fluids in the car, I guess, that might need replaced at some point. But I mean, again, that's just like coolant. It's not like, and it won't be needed like every year. It'll probably be like way down the road.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Yeah, I don't know if my Bolt has anything like that.
It's got to have some kind of coolant, but I'm not sure like how you access it or how you would even change that.
Yeah, I don't
honestly.
know if you would have to replace it like after a certain bit. I don't know. I'll have to check into that.
Yeah, it's probably in the manual somewhere.
Oh, the manual.
The manual.
I don't want to open that.
So I'm trying to think of what other costs really are associated with EVs that people might not be used to. Because most of the other costs are pretty similar to what you've got with a gas car. I mean, you've got tires, you've got brakes. One thing with brakes, though, we've got Regen Braking, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to use your brakes a lot less. Have you had to replace your brakes at all? Or
not yet.
With your brakes?
Not yet. There is some concern with like utilizing Regen versus like the physical brakes.
Yeah.
That your brakes will rust over and like you might have to replace them based on that.
Yeah.
So from time to time I tend to like use my physical brakes just to get them
to clean
used.
them off.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's actually a good thought too.
So your brakes are going to last longer, honestly, because you're not using your brakes as often. You can use that Regen, charge up your battery as well.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of benefits to it. I've heard that same thing though, that you should like kind of turn Regen off and slam on your brakes a couple times to clear off those those rotors and keep them clean.
Do it in a parking lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know my Chevy Volt that I had. Before I traded in. I had 55,000 miles on it, and I drove roughly about like 35,000 miles, and I hadn't had to replace the brakes.
Okay.
Like they were still like good.
Yeah.
because of that Regen. One other thing I do want to touch on is annual registrations.
Yeah.
So not all states have these registration fees for electric vehicles, but the thing is when you're driving a gas-powered vehicle, you don't necessarily see the taxes you're paying when you're filling up the car. It's all kind of within that price you're paying per gallon.
It's all baked in, yeah.
So there's a lot of controversy regarding these annual registration fees for electric vehicle drivers that states are implementing. So EVs are paying like that fee to help keep up road maintenance, fix any damages that like an EV might cause while driving.
Yeah.
So basically what these annual registration fees are is a fee that you pay when you go to register like your license plate or your tags on your vehicle. And here in Ohio, we have a $200 electric vehicle plug-in hybrid fee and then a $100 hybrid fee. So if you're driving a gas-powered hybrid electric vehicle, you still have to pay that.
Yeah.
So that's expensive.
Yes.
You honestly, if you calculate it, you will probably never pay that much in gas. And to us electric vehicle drivers, it's definitely a controversial topic because in my opinion, I think it's way overpriced.
Yeah. And I know the sentiment, and we talk about this in our like local EV groups all the time, is our sentiment is we don't think it's unfair to pay. Like, we're not trying to say that, like, we shouldn't pay gas or we shouldn't pay road tax because that's ridiculous. Like, I think we should pay to use the roads.
Absolutely,
like,
yeah.
Something everybody's using, I use every day. So, like, should definitely pay to use the roads. And like Brandon was saying, the math really doesn't add up with that $200 with the amount of EVs on average drive a lot less than gas-powered cars, so you're already driving fewer miles. They do, based on equivalent miles driven in a gas vehicle and fueling up that gas vehicle, you're never going to get anywhere close to $200 a year paid in gas tax. And honestly, it really doesn't add up. And the way we do it in Ohio is pretty ridiculous too, because we combine plug-in hybrids and like full EVs in the same $200 fee. So if you're a plug-in hybrid, which uses gas and electric, what if you just drove gas the entire time? You're paying that gas tax, and you're also paying $200 on top of that.
Yeah.
So, like, it kind of screws over those drivers, I feel like. I feel like it might be most fair for the pure EV drivers.
Yeah.
And even like the hybrid drivers, I think, get screwed over the most because they're paying the gas tax and they pay $100 like no matter what.
Yeah.
And you could have an old hybrid that gets 30 miles per gallon.
Yeah.
It still has a tiny little battery in it.
Yeah.
And you got to pay $100.
Yep.
So
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it's a lot of just kind of whoever's writing these bills not understanding the technology as well.
Yeah.
And it's hard because a lot of stuff goes into those bills, but I don't know.
Yeah. It's education.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's good that we have some good representatives here in Ohio that try their best to educate about electric vehicles. So like the thing with the annual registrations is that obviously, you know, we have listeners around the world, which thank you guys. Honestly, that's awesome.
Yeah. We were just looking at the stats before this. We've got like people from all over.
Yeah,
so.
It's great. Thank you guys for supporting Living Electric. The one thing I do want to say is that like if you are not in Ohio, it's definitely good to do your research to see how much if there is a registration fee, just to kind of get yourself familiar with it.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely not something fun to be surprised by.
Yeah, as with any big purchase, I think just kind of budgeting and understanding what you can afford before you move into an EV or a new vehicle at all. I mean, it's important to understand those things. One thing I do tell people that like immediately dismiss EVs thinking they can't afford them is you actually probably might be able to if you factor in gas costs and like what your electricity offset would be there. So I know for me, I'm probably spending more driving a Tesla than I was driving my old car. Because my old monthly payment was around like $500 a month, and I was spending $200 a month. Or sorry, my old payment was $300 a month, and I was spending $200 a month on gas. So it was about $500 to drive that car per month. And now my Tesla payment is around $700, so pretty freaking expensive. And but now my electricity costs are essentially zero, so it's really only like a $200 per month bump versus like going $400 from my old car payment, right? So
I'm actually around the same price.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was stupid and I rolled over a lot of negative equity into the Bolt. Fortunately, the tax credit and like the dealership incentives really helped.
Okay.
But I'm sitting about $656 a month.
Okay.
And then obviously about $30 a month for electricity.
Okay.
So about like $680.
Yeah, and I'm driving a freaking $48,000 car. So
yeah, but I will say my lease for my Golf was about $580.
Okay.
So it's not too much of a difference, and I was paying $200 plus a month in gas.
Yeah.
So I'm saving money.
So and then you throw in oil changes and all that stuff kind of spread out through over the months, and I think once you crunch the numbers, you can probably afford an EV, honestly.
Yeah, especially used ones. I mean, there's some really good deals on used ones.
I think that's something people are not considering enough is having at least a single EV if they're literally using it for commuting to work.
Yeah.
Like you can buy a cheap used EV for under $10,000, under $5,000 in some cases.
Yeah.
That will be more than enough miles to get you to work and back, and you can just plug it in overnight and be good. Yeah. You've got essentially a zero maintenance vehicle you can use for commuting.
Yeah, and most of them are low mileage, so the battery degradation probably isn't non-existent.
Exactly. Or if your kids need a car and you're like looking for their first car, and they're not going to be. I mean, I don't know. Depends on your parenting style, I guess. But
start them out right. Do not teach them how to pump gas. Teach them how to plug in a car.
That's right.
Because I feel like the next generation will not know how to pump gas.
Yeah.
And to me, that's exciting.
It is.
I forgot how to pump gas.
What button do I press?
Yeah, right. What do I do?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I think overall, when I look at like the finance aspects of like driving electric and, you know, some of the other benefits of going electric, I would never not consider going electric.
Yeah.
Like, I always knew I would go fully electric, but
to
be living it daily, I would never change a thing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It fits everything that I need a car to fit.
Yeah, and on that point, I think if you are looking at a new car right now and you're kind of still turned off by EVs, I would say go test drive one if you haven't, or talk to an EV owner, because that's kind of probably the two best experiences you could have. I mean, listening to this podcast, we hope you've learned a lot about an EV if you are considering it for your next vehicle. I know just a lot of people out there are still very curious about the thought of it, and when I ask them about it, they're like, "Oh, I'll probably get one down the road," which I think is a start for a lot of people. Even just considering it is a big step. So, going away from the norm of gas is still still tough for a lot of people. So
well, it's a big step, but once you do it, I know for me, I don't look back.
It's very hard to go back for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So you got any good jokes? Any finance jokes? I'm sure there's some out there.
I know. I'm like trying to think. I mean, I could always do. I hope those numbers don't shock you. But I feel like that one's lame. But that's the whole point of those jokes.
Trying to think of one that's like, because like green can be like money, but also cars.
I know,
like
that's
EVs. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, go green in many ways by going electric.
Like writing a really bad ad right now.
Right. I know. Thank you guys for listening to Living Electric. If you guys have any questions or if you guys want to talk about any other EV finance topics, definitely hit us up on our Twitter account, which is @livingelectric_, our Instagram account, as well as our Facebook page with the name of our podcast. So if you have any questions, just let us know. Anyways, thank you guys for supporting Living Electric.